Hello everyone, and welcome back to our video series here. Today's video is actually not content specific. It's a short video to kind of help you with some multiple choice strategy. And so I figure the best way to talk about multiple choice strategy is to take a look at some example multiple choice questions. So what I did here was I pulled up the practice exam that I created from AP Classroom with all publicly available questions. So some of these may appear familiar, or you may remember them, as there are two public exams. And so I figured the easiest thing to do is to kind of look at a question potentially from each unit, or at least from a couple, to kind of talk through my thought process. And hopefully that will help you kind of form your own process as far as what is the best strategy when it comes down to looking at a multiple choice question. So if we take a look here, right, this first question, the first thing I noticed before I even read the question is that it's a question about a box plot. And the other thing I notice about this box plot is that there is an outlier. That's the first thing I noticed. Now, that may have nothing to do with the question whatsoever. But the first thing I'm doing when I see a graphical display given to me is I'm starting to pick out key features. All right, so I notice that it's asymmetric. I notice that there's an outlier. Now, when I actually go to read the question, which is the second thing that I'm going to do here, I notice that all it's asking me for is the interquartile range. So knowing that I can read a box plot, it looks like Q3 is at about 20. I know that Q1 is down here somewhere between 0 and 10, probably pretty close to 5. So that leaves me with only one answer choice that makes any sense, which is 16. And so in this particular case, the question itself actually ended up having nothing to do with the outlier. But again, strategically speaking, anytime I see a graph, I'm starting to pick out unusual features. I'm looking for where is the center. Essentially, I'm thinking about socks the moment that I see a picture or any kind of graph. So moving down here, for this particular question, number 6 here, we are asked to interpret the value 19. So notice, I didn't read this question beforehand, right? I jumped straight down to what is the question? In all reality, I don't care that we're trying to predict the concentration of zinc right at this moment. I'll care when I read the answer choices, but right now I'm looking for what number do I have to interpret. So in this case, when I see up here in this printout, 19 happens to be right in the middle here. And also very nicely in this printout, it tells me that my response variable, or my y-axis, is zinc. So I know that this 19 is the increase or the predicted increase in zinc for every 1 part per million of lead. And so that answer choice is right here. It's B. On average, there is a predicted increase of 19 parts per million in the concentration of zinc in Y for every 1 part per million concentration of lead. And so again, it's about gaming what is the question asking me? Because the other thing that you have to remember is that you have on average 2.25 minutes per question. So 2 minutes and 15 seconds. And so what I'm trying to do here is get to the root of what do I need to do as fast as possible so I can use that time to interpret the question and find the valuable information. I'm not going to start reading paragraphs until it becomes important. And so in this case, I jumped to where's the question mark? And then I started to pick out the important information afterwards. Now, granted, that 2 minutes and 15 seconds is an average. And so it's not going to be, exactly that. And if you take longer on some questions, that's fine, because some other ones will be incredibly short. So let's look a little further down here. These are all probability and tree diagrams. Okay, let's look at number 17 for probability here. A recent study reported 45% of adults now all get their news online. Notice the difference for this one is I saw all the answer choices. I saw they were all in the binomial formula. And so looking at the answer choices isn't going to help give away anything to me, especially because everything is in the same order. They all are 0.45 to something and 0.55 to something. So the answer choices here aren't helping give away anything. This question is also relatively short, so reading it isn't going to take a ton of time. And probably because it's short, every piece of information is going to be necessary. So we are randomly selecting a sample of 8 adults, and what's the probability that 6 all get their news online? So because I know the binomial formula, I know my sample size is on top there in the sample size choose successes. So that automatically eliminates A and B. Those are out. I also know that from the binomial formula, whatever I'm choosing, right, 6 successes needs to be the power on my probability of success. And that only happens in answer choice D. This is the only answer choice where 0.45 is to the 6th power and we have the correct combination formula at the beginning. And so really quickly, I'm able to cut down 2 answer choices because the first part's wrong. And then from the remaining 3, all I'm looking at to distinguish the correct answer is what has the correct probability raised to the correct power. That's all. So again, the strategy here of cutting down timing by quickly eliminating the first 2 because the formula is wrong. And also notice here, I didn't need the formula sheet for that. So while having the formula sheet is great, if you know a bunch of these very frequently used formulas, you don't have to go ahead and click on that reference, and it can save you some more time. So let's take a look at one more here. I'm going to jump down to a confidence interval one here because this happens quite often. For 27, we have an agricultural engineer, random sample of 30 farms, and we have a 95% confidence interval. And here's that interval, 367 to 558. Again, short question, so taking the 10 seconds to read it, no big deal. Which of the following is an appropriate interpretation? Again, whenever I see a confidence interval, I'm making sure I read very closely because the interpretation piece now, am I interpreting the level or am I interpreting the interval? Because what I am interpreting will now make a very big difference in my answer. And in this particular case, it is the confidence level. And so I know, generally speaking, the confidence level is the percentage of intervals that will contain what I'm looking for, assuming I took all possible random samples. And so that's what I'm looking for. Which one has the wording of 95% of all random samples? Oh, but wait a minute. There's 2 of those, D and E, and this is incredibly common on the AP exam. They will do this to you. The wording between these 2 is very small. One says population mean, one says sample mean. D is the correct answer here because it says that contain the mean size of all farms in the United States. If you notice, E says the sample mean. Well, the sample mean is my starting point. 100% of intervals will contain the sample mean. And so again, just as a general strategy, read as little as possible. And I mean that. Read only what is necessary. So I tend to start with what is the question, like find the question mark and read that sentence, and then work my way back if I need something. And also eliminate answer choices as quickly as you can so you can spend that time investigating your remaining answer choices. The last strategy I will give you as a last-ditch effort, you've got 30 seconds left and you have 10 questions left to answer. Pick the same answer choice for all of them because now it becomes an or probability and not an and probability. So I hope that was helpful just for some generic question strategy, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.